Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. We were sitting in a Starbucks when she said it. Calm, detached, like she'd been rehearsing the line in front of a mirror. I need to find myself, she told me, her fingers wrapped around a caramel latte she wasn't drinking. Alone. The word hung in the air like smoke, thin but choking. Around us, the place buzzed with the usual noise. People typing on MacBooks, a couple laughing too loudly near the window, a kid crying over a dropped cake pop. Life went on, except mine didn't. I didn't argue. I didn't ask who she was trying to find or where she'd lost herself. I just said, "Perfect. I won't be there when you do." She blinked, confused, maybe expecting a fight. But I was done fighting for a version of her that kept rewriting itself every month. Her name's Claire. She used to paint at night, barefoot in the kitchen, leaving streaks of color on the tiles I built myself. I'm an architect. I see the world in lines, angles, structure. She said she envied that, once. Then she started calling it emotional rigidity. That was before she found the coach. Some guy who runs online sessions about energetic boundaries and self-alignment. I saw one of his videos once, him talking about divine independence while wearing beads and selling $300 courses on self-love. Claire called it growth. I called it hypnosis. The night she made her announcement, she didn't look at me. She looked through me, like I was another wall she had to knock down to expand her truth. I watched her pack her canvas tote, drop her iPhone inside, and walk out without looking back. When I drove home in my Ford F-150, the silence hit harder than any argument ever could. The house still smelled like her candles from Target, lavender, and something synthetic. On the table, her notebook was open. I read the last line she wrote. "You can't love anyone until you love yourself." Maybe that's true, but what they don't tell you is, once some people start loving themselves, they stop having room for anyone else. That night, I didn't text her, didn't call, didn't ask where she'd sleep. I just stood in the doorway of our empty living room, staring at the plans for the house we were building. Every room drawn with purpose, except one, the one she called her studio. I had left it blank, a perfect square of nothing. Maybe that's when I realized she didn't want space. She wanted escape, and I was done being the man she used as a wall to push against. By morning, I'd already started drawing new lines, not on paper, but in my life. Clean ones, uncrossable. Claire wanted to find herself, so I gave her all the space she'd ever need. A week passed before I realized she hadn't really left me. Not completely. She was still in the playlists on my Spotify, the fingerprints on the fridge door, the faint trace of her perfume in the hallway. Her absence had a shape, and it fit everywhere. At work, I tried to bury myself in a new project, a museum expansion downtown. Clean geometry, rational lines, everything she said my mind lacked. The contrast was almost comforting. Until one night, while I was revising the floor plan, a notification blinked on my screen. Claire had posted on Instagram, "Healing isn't selfish, it's survival." The photo showed her sitting cross-legged in front of a ring light, a half-smile on her face, surrounded by candles. The caption was longer than anything she'd ever written to me. I didn't comment. I didn't like it. But I read it twice, like an architect studying the cracks in a wall he already knows won't hold. A few days later, her friend Melissa dropped by my office. She said Claire had joined some collective, a group led by that same online coach. They were planning a retreat somewhere in Arizona to disconnect from toxic attachments. Melissa looked at me when she said it, waiting for a reaction. I didn't give her one. That night, I drove to Walmart for groceries I didn't need, just to move. The aisles felt too bright, too clean, like the world was pretending nothing was falling apart. I picked up things without thinking: bread, detergent, a new razor, and realized I was stocking up for someone who no longer existed. When I came home, I opened her old laptop. She'd left it on the kitchen counter the day she left, probably thinking it was harmless. But the browser was still logged into her messages. I didn't mean to look, but something made me click. There it was, a thread between her and the coach. He wasn't flirting. That would have been easier. He was dismantling me in soft words. "He doesn't see you. He tries to fix what should just be felt." She replied, "He's a good man, but heavy. I need lightness." I closed the laptop, sat in the dark for a long time, and didn't feel anger. Just clarity. The kind that hurts more than betrayal, because it shows you the pattern, how love slowly turns into a lesson you didn't ask for. I realized she hadn't replaced me with another man. She replaced me with a mirror that only showed her face. And somehow, that was worse. That night, I stopped checking her posts. I stopped waiting for explanations. I began tracing the edges of my own silence, the kind she couldn't interpret, couldn't fix, couldn't heal her way out of. She wanted detachment. I was ready to give it form. By the third week, the silence between us had turned into a map. Every memory was a coordinate, every unanswered message a border. I stopped wondering what she was doing. Instead, I started noticing what she wasn't doing. No calls, no texts, not even a casual "hope you're okay." It was the kind of peace that feels wrong, like a heartbeat that skips just enough to remind you you're alive. I drove by our old house once, not to see her, just to see what she'd done with it. Through the window, I saw the same walls I designed, the same structure. But something had changed. The order was gone. My precise lines had been replaced with driftwood sculptures, hanging plants, crystals catching sunlight in uneven reflections. Her car was in the driveway, parked crooked, as if it didn't belong there anymore. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. Later that night, I received an email from our shared bank account. Automatic alert. Withdrawal for an energy retreat deposit. It wasn't about the money. It was about how casual it looked, like paying for groceries. I logged in and scrolled through the recent charges. Incense orders from Amazon, new sketchpads, streaming subscriptions for mindfulness podcasts. No trace of the life we'd built together. Only a trail of self-discovery receipts. That's when something in me clicked. Architects understand integrity, how every structure stands only when the foundation is honest. Claire had started building without me, but her foundation was already cracking. Not because of me, but because it was built on illusion, a self she was still trying to design from pieces of whoever told her what enlightenment looked like this week. The next morning, I walked into my office, cleared the blueprints off the table, and spread out the house plan I'd drawn for us. The layout was perfect, balanced, efficient, alive with purpose. Except for one space, the blank square she'd chosen for her creative energy room. I stared at it, pencil in hand, and drew a single diagonal line through it. It wasn't anger. It was closure in the language I understood best, geometry. For the first time, I saw our story like a building that had reached its limit. No need to demolish it. Just stop reinforcing what's already collapsing. I placed the final version of the plan into a folder and sealed it in an envelope with her name. It wasn't revenge. It was documentation, proof that something once stood here, designed with care, and abandoned in search of something shapeless. That night, I turned off my phone, deleted her number, and started the process of disappearing, not dramatically, but methodically. Architects don't destroy. They erase with precision. When I finally disappeared, it wasn't dramatic. No slammed doors, no final messages. Just absence, clean, surgical, deliberate. I left the envelope with the floor plan on her kitchen counter, the house key beside it, and nothing else. My name was still on the lease, but by morning, I was already gone. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment downtown, a place with sharp lines and cold light. No paintings, no colors, just space and silence. The kind of silence that doesn't echo, it absorbs. I changed my number, closed my social media, switched offices. To anyone watching, it might have looked like I'd gone off-grid. In reality, I'd just gone inward. She texted 3 days later. "I need to talk." I didn't answer. Then, "This isn't what I meant by space." I read it once, then archived the message. Words like meant and space didn't matter anymore. She wanted to find herself alone. I was giving her exactly that. No resistance, no comfort, no reflection to look into. At night, I drive my car through the empty streets, past the coffee shop where it all started, past the life we built like a blueprint that never got approved. Sometimes I'd stop by the river and watch the lights blur across the water. The city never really sleeps. It just hums, pretending to rest. A few weeks later, Melissa called. I didn't pick up, but she left a voicemail. "She's different," she said. "She looks fine online, but she's not okay." She said she feels invisible. That word, invisible, stuck with me, because that's exactly what I'd become. And for the first time, it felt like power. I saw Claire once after that, by accident. She was sitting alone outside a small cafe, scrolling her phone, surrounded by the same books she used to mock, titles about energy, awakening, boundaries. She looked up, saw me across the street, and froze. Her expression wasn't anger or regret. It was recognition, the kind you feel when you realize the person you left behind has become someone you can no longer reach. I didn't wave. I didn't slow down. I just kept walking. That night, I opened the last message she'd sent before everything ended. I need to find myself. I deleted it, and with it, the thread. The weight I'd been carrying disappeared with it. Sometimes the cleanest endings don't come with words. They come with distance so absolute, it becomes permanent. And somewhere in that distance, she finally got what she asked for, herself. But I was no longer part of the reflection. Disappearing was easy. Staying gone, that took precision. I didn't block her, didn't make a show of cutting ties. I simply became unreachable in ways she couldn't define. I changed offices, registered my new address under a company name, and had my calls rerouted through a service. No confrontation, no closure, just silence that expanded until it filled every room she once occupied. But I didn't stop watching. Not obsessively, strategically. A friend at the architecture firm's legal department owed me a favor. One day, over lunch, he mentioned that the self-proclaimed coach Claire followed had been flagged for questionable business activity. Selling spiritual investments, using client donations to fund personal retreats. I didn't ask for details, but I remembered. Architects don't forget cracks once they've seen them. I gathered everything quietly, screenshots, payment trails, the kind of digital fingerprints people leave when they think they're untouchable. It wasn't revenge. It was alignment. I wasn't trying to destroy her world. I was just removing the scaffolding holding up her illusion. When the first article hit Facebook, Wellness Guru under investigation for fraud, it spread fast. Melissa texted me that Claire had deleted her Instagram overnight. Her tribe, as she called them, started to scatter. Suddenly, the words energy and boundaries didn't sound so divine anymore. I didn't post anything, didn't share, didn't gloat. I went to Waffle House instead, ordered coffee, and watched the rain hit the window. The waitress asked if I wanted refills, and I nodded, realizing it was the first real conversation I'd had in weeks. There was peace in the ordinary again. Later, I saw her name pop up in a group chat we once shared with friends. She said she was taking time offline to realign. No one responded. That's how silence works. It starts as punishment and ends as reflection. She didn't know I had anything to do with the information getting out. She probably never would. That's the point. Not every strike has to make noise. Some are meant to leave no fingerprints, only the echo of consequence. That night, I walked through my apartment, bare walls, clear light, and realized the world had tilted. She wanted space. I gave her a universe. And now, for the first time, she was the one standing in it alone, unsure where the edges were. I didn't need to ruin her. I just needed to remove myself. The rest fell on its own. When everything around her began to crumble, I didn't need to lift a finger. The world did what silence couldn't, turn its back. The investigation on her coach went public, and the people who had once called him a visionary now called him a fraud. His collective dissolved overnight. Those same followers who had filled her comments with hearts and affirmations quietly deleted their posts, pretending they'd never believed. Melissa reached out again, this time through a short text. She's staying with her sister. Won't talk to anyone. She looks lost. I didn't reply. Lost was the word she'd chosen for herself. She wanted to wander. I simply stopped guiding her back. At work, things began to move differently. My design started getting noticed. Clean, bold, unflinching. One of my proposals was approved for a new museum wing. It should have been a victory, but it felt more like equilibrium. I'd stopped building for approval. I was building again because I could. One afternoon, while reviewing models, my assistant mentioned that Claire had shown up at the firm. She hadn't asked for me, only left a package. I didn't open it right away. It sat on my desk for 2 days, brown paper, her handwriting across the top. When I finally unfolded it, inside was a small canvas, one of her older paintings. Blue lines dissolving into white, like sky through glass. No note, no explanation, just the echo of something she once believed in. I placed it face down and went back to work. Weeks passed. Her social media stayed silent. Word spread that she'd tried to start private sessions again, but no one showed up. The world she built on soft words and borrowed light had collapsed, quietly, efficiently, without spectacle. Sometimes at night, I drive by her old studio. The windows were dark, a for lease sign hanging crooked. The only reflection left in the glass was my own. The truth is, people don't always fall because someone pushes them. Sometimes they just run out of places to stand. And now she was learning what it meant to stand alone. The same space she'd begged for had become her echo chamber. Every affirmation she used to whisper into the void came back to her unanswered. She wanted freedom. But freedom without gravity is just drifting. I wasn't her gravity anymore. And she finally understood what happens when there's nothing left to orbit. It had been months since I'd heard her name spoken out loud. People who once mentioned Claire with admiration now avoided bringing her up. The scandal with her coach had faded, but the stain it left didn't. In a small town, people forget slowly. They forgive even slower. I lived quietly. My new apartment overlooked the river. At night, the reflections of the streetlights stretched across the water like broken glass. I'd sit by the window with black coffee, sketching designs on tracing paper, rebuilding myself line by line. Structure was my language. Silence was my peace. Then one evening, as I was locking up the office, I saw her waiting by my car. She looked smaller somehow, like the world had pressed in on her and she hadn't pushed back. She said nothing at first, just stood there in the yellow glow of the parking lot lights, holding that same canvas she'd sent me months ago. Her voice was quiet. She said she'd been working on herself, that she'd been healing. The words landed differently now, stripped of their performance. She said she didn't come to fix anything. She just wanted to understand how I could disappear so completely. I told her she taught me how. She looked away, nodded, and said people had stopped calling her. Clients, friends, even Melissa. She said she'd thought space would help her see clearly, but now she just felt invisible. The irony was sharp enough to cut through the air. I didn't say it out loud, but we both knew space only works when someone is waiting on the other side of it. Before she left, she asked if I'd ever miss what we had. I told her missing something doesn't mean you want it back. Sometimes, it just means you finally understand why it had to end. She stood there for a long moment, holding that painting like it was proof of something real. Then she whispered that she was sorry. It wasn't an apology for leaving. It was for not seeing what she had before she decided it wasn't enough. I didn't answer. She left the canvas on the hood of my car and walked away into the night. When I drove home, I didn't look at it. I just let it sit there beside me in the passenger seat, the colors catching light from passing cars. For the first time, I realized the silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It had weight, and that weight no longer belonged to me. After that night in the parking lot, I thought she'd disappear again. But silence has a strange gravity. It pulls the people who once escaped you right back into orbit. 2 weeks later, she showed up at my building. No warning, no message. Just her car parked outside in the rain, headlights off, like she'd been sitting there for hours working up the courage to knock. When I opened the door, she looked exhausted. Not from crying, but from pretending she was fine for too long. Her voice trembled when she said she wasn't here to talk about the past. She just wanted to understand how I could be so calm. I told her calm isn't peace. It's what happens when you've already been through the fire and there's nothing left to burn. She stepped inside. My apartment was nothing like the home we used to share. Bare walls, one couch, a single lamp. No color, no warmth. Just lines, balance, and quiet. She looked around like she was walking through a version of me she never met. She asked if I'd really moved on, or if this was my way of hiding. I said it didn't matter anymore. Both paths lead to the same place, distance. She tried to explain herself then. How the space she'd asked for wasn't supposed to become a wall. How she thought losing me would make her stronger. I didn't interrupt. Every word she spoke built a house made of air. Fragile, transparent, ready to collapse under its own truth. When she asked if I'd ever loved her the way she needed, I finally looked at her. I told her the truth. I loved her the way I build, precisely, with care, always making sure the foundation could carry the weight. She, on the other hand, loved like a painter, reckless, emotional, always chasing color even if it bled outside the lines. She said she missed the way I used to look at her, like I could see everything she tried to hide. I told her I still could, I just stopped wanting to. That was the only thing that broke her composure. She turned away, hands trembling slightly, and said she didn't know how to fix it. I told her it's not broken. It's finished. She stood in silence for a long time, eyes scanning the empty apartment, and whispered, "You really did give me space." I nodded, because now she finally understood, space can be freedom, but it can also be exile. After she left my apartment that night, I thought it was over, but endings never happen in a single moment. They unfold quietly, like slow decay, an invisible collapse that no one sees until there's nothing left standing. I started noticing her name again, not from her, but from others. Melissa mentioned she'd stopped teaching. Her old clients said she wasn't returning calls. Someone said she'd sold her studio equipment on Facebook Marketplace. The woman who once preached detachment was now detached from everything that kept her alive. One evening, I stopped by the grocery store after work. In the checkout line, I saw her standing by the self-checkout, scanning a few items: cheap candles, a frozen meal, a small bouquet that didn't look like it belonged to anyone. She didn't notice me at first. She looked quiet, not broken, not defeated, just emptied out. The noise she used to carry with her, that constant hum of self-discovery and performance, was gone. When she finally looked up, her eyes met mine across the aisle. No anger, no blame, just the heavy recognition of what we'd become. Two people who once tried to build a future out of mismatched blueprints. She didn't say anything, and I didn't either. There was nothing left to say. Some truths are too sharp for words. Later that night, Melissa sent me a message. She said Claire had been struggling to find clients, that the people who once followed her for guidance had turned away. "She's not the same," Melissa wrote. "She just stays home and paints. Alone." I didn't answer. Weeks went by, and I heard she'd started showing her art again. Small exhibits at local cafes. Nothing like the healing circles she used to lead. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd finally found something real, but only after everything false had burned away. Sometimes I drive by those places, watching from the street as she set up her paintings. There was one she hung in every show, the same blue and white canvas she'd given me, the one I'd left face down on my desk. And in that moment, I realized something simple but absolute. She hadn't lost me to another person or a mistake. She'd lost me to clarity. Because once you learn to live without noise, you can never go back to chaos, no matter how familiar it once felt. It was almost a year to the day since she'd said she needed to find herself. A sentence that used to echo in my head like a siren now felt like background noise, distant, harmless. Time hadn't erased what happened, but it had redrawn it into something sharper, cleaner, almost peaceful. I was driving home late one evening when I saw her again. Not in person, on a flyer taped to the cafe window I used to pass every morning. Local Artist Showcase, Claire Emerson. Her smile on the poster was softer than I remembered, smaller, almost fragile. She looked like someone who had finally run out of performances. Out of curiosity, I stopped by the exhibit that weekend. The place was half full, quiet, warm, filled with the faint smell of coffee and cheap wine. She was standing near the corner, talking to a couple who seemed genuinely interested in her work. For a second, she looked almost happy. I stayed in the back, unnoticed, watching. Her paintings had changed. Gone were the chaotic colors and abstract affirmations. The new ones were simple, shadows, reflections, negative space. One piece stopped me cold. It was a room drawn in grayscale, with a single empty chair near a window. She'd titled it The Space He Left. She turned her head slightly and saw me. Our eyes met, and for a heartbeat, everything went still. The crowd, the noise, the distance. She didn't smile. Neither did I. We just stood there, connected by silence, both knowing this was the closest we'd ever be again. After a moment, she nodded. Not a greeting, an acknowledgement. Then she turned away to speak to someone else, her voice quiet but steady. I left before she could look again. Outside, the air was cold, the kind that sharpens everything it touches. I sat in my car, started the engine, and didn't look back. The road ahead was clear, wide, almost inviting. People think closure comes from answers. It doesn't. It comes when you stop needing them. She asked for space. I gave her permanence. And as I drove home, I realized the truth she'd never understand. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. Now she cries into a mirror she once thought was a window, and I, finally, am nowhere to be found. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.